Okay, we still have a lot of people filtering in, but I think we will get started. I'd like to welcome you all to the 2021 Business Technology Symposium. My name is Debbie Campo, and I'm a professor of Management Information Systems in the Carson College of Business. BTS is an annual event of the Department of Management, Information Systems, and Entrepreneurship. It's been an event for more than a decade, which is old people speak for a really long time, and I don't actually know how long, but it's okay. And BTS is designed to give you insights on how IT is used in business to create value and to help you understand the nature of IT-related careers. I'm very happy to be joined today by two guest speakers. Hannah Fisher is a graduate of the Carson College of Business. She earned her Bachelor of Arts in Business Administration with a major in Information Systems in 2015 and her MBA in 2016. Hannah works at MongoDB. MongoDB is an open source, document-based database management tool used to handle the types of unstructured data that come from Internet of Things, among other recent developments. Hannah is a senior customer success program manager, which is a role that she recently advocated for and had her company create. I'm also joined by Ben Brewer. Ben is also a WSU graduate, and he is currently the Chief Revenue Officer for Nintex. Nintex is a global organization that provides business process management software. At Nintex, he oversees, among other things, the sales organization across North America, Europe, the Middle East, and Asia Pacific. Prior to Nintex, he spent about 14 years at SAP Concur, moving up through the ranks of the sales organization. So welcome to you both, and thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Really excited to be here.
So I'm going to start by asking each of our panelists to tell us a little bit about themselves and a little bit more about the companies they work for and their career journeys. And Hannah, maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. Glad to meet you all. Really excited to be here, as I said. So like Debbie said, I work for MongoDB. I'm a senior customer success program manager. It is still a tongue twister and a little bit of a long-winded title. But like she said, prior to that, I was a customer success manager and I helped advocate for this role to be developed for my team. So I support all of the customer success managers globally that work at MongoDB. We're about a group of 100 strong and growing like crazy. For those of you that are not super familiar with MongoDB, we're a document-based database tool. We offer both on-prem as well as software as a service offerings. And for those of you that are not super familiar with document-based database models, you can imagine rather than using rows and columns to store your data like a typical relational database tool, you can use something called a document. And you can take, for example, if you were to think of your student profile at WSU, some students may have just a major and others may have a major and a minor. And with the document model, you're able to basically adapt that profile for each student or whatever type of record that you're storing. And ultimately, that allows you to be really flexible and very dynamic as your applications grow and scale. It's also object-oriented, which means that developers already know how to use it really easily, and it's basically set up in a way that's easy for them to communicate with and allows them to grow and scale on a dime.
So what kinds of things do you do day to day in your role in the company?
Yeah, great question. So it's definitely recently switched and transitioned a little bit. So previously I was working with a book of about 30 customers in our enterprise space and basically would help them with whatever issues that they needed. If you think about the customer success role, our typical model is that we are expected to, if a customer spends $100,000 with us today, ensure that they renew at that same amount. But really on a day-to-day basis, we're building relationships with our customers, getting in, finding out what applications they're building, the use cases that they're working on, and ultimately supporting them and making them as successful as possible. In my current day-to-day, I'm now enabling my team to be more successful. So those 100 other customer success managers that I mentioned, I'm basically helping develop processes and improvements for them to make their day as frictionless as possible and make things as streamlined and straightforward for them while making them successful too.
Thank you, Hannah. Ben, let's turn to you.
Yeah, great to be with you guys. So wish I could be there with you in person. Obviously, the Zoom world I'm kind of over it. And also, obviously, Pullman's one of my favorite places on earth. Having traveled the world, Pullman's still up there. So hope you guys are all well. But yeah, thanks again for having me. Could not be more excited about being here with all of you. So again, my name is Ben Brewer. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at a company called Nintex. Nintex is a process automation company, cloud-based. So basically what that means is think of any time you have a process within a company, you're filling out a form. So maybe you check into the doctor's office and you have to go through a list of questions. Maybe you're doing inventory for a supply chain company. All different sorts of things like that, the process within a company. We automate that. We were founded about in 2005 in Melbourne, Australia, eventually moved our headquarters to Bellevue, Washington, here in the Seattle area, for those of you guys who are familiar with the West Side. Started about 5 million in revenue over the years. We're now operating about 200 million in revenue, a little over 1,000 employees, and starting to acquire to grow. But our core set is process automation. Now that can include forms like I described. It can also include RPA, so replacing kind of that manual repeatable process that a human would do through robotic process automation. And then we have other areas of forms and process mapping. So if you go into a company and say, okay, we're going to grow this part of our business, how will the processes need to change to effectively drive the outcomes we need to do? We have a tool that allows you to map out the process as well. But overarching, our platform allows you to automate the processes within a company. My specific role, I'm a member of the executive team, and so I oversee everything revenue. So whether that's sales, generating revenue, whether that's retaining revenue, kind of like what Hannah just outlined, our client success team. We also have a renewals team, and then we have what's called channel. So not only do we sell our services directly to consumer, we also have partners that resell our application as well. Primarily those partners, very strong in the US, but also in the international markets like in MENA, the Middle East, different parts of Europe, where you need that local presence and you may not have a field representation there. You have partners there, your channel, to operate that. So that's also a part of the revenue organization.
Excellent. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you came to be in your current role, your career journey?
Yeah, very non-conventional. I am a proud graduate of the Edward R. School of Communication. I originally went to WSU to major in broadcast news. Started to become follically challenged, so I didn't think TV was going to be my my avenue. But no, I originally graduated from communications. When I got out of school, I actually went into different areas of broadcast. Worked in radio, worked in TV a little bit, and just found didn't have the passion for what it takes to be very successful in that. I love the people I was working with, but I started to get much more interested in business, in meeting, especially when I was working for radio. I was working with a lot of small to mid-sized companies to sell them advertising, but I would become very good friends with the owners of these small businesses. It could be anything from a restaurant to a motorcycle shop to a plumbing company, but I got to understand kind of the inner workings, how companies operate and what it takes to drive good outcomes in a company. And so that led me into looking into technology because oftentimes, obviously, tech is helping drive those outcomes. And by a great source of luck, I fell into a company that was called Concur. Concur, at the time when I started there, they were a travel and expense company, a SaaS company, a cloud-based tech company in Redmond, not Microsoft. Concur, it was about a couple hundred employees, probably like, I don't know, 10 million in revenue, just to give you an idea of size. And what Concur did was they took travel and expense. So when you travel for your company and when you expense things, meals, different costs when you're traveling, they handled that in their service. And we kind of caught lightning in a bottle. So we grew that organization. When I started, was again a couple hundred employees, probably 20, 30 million in revenue. When I left a couple years ago to come to Nintex, SAP acquired us, and we were about $1 billion in revenue and about 12,000 employees. So it was a crazy ride. And so one of the reasons I stayed there for so long was the company continued to evolve year over year. So I got new challenges, new roles, kind of like Hannah's describing where she's at. New positions become open as the needs come. And so it was a lot of fun. So that 10-year run was a true blessing because I got to carry many different loads of work, wear different hats, which prepared me for running a company like I do today. So very lucky in that standpoint.
And my guess is the students in the room are a little bit puzzled about how you can have a wild ride in doing travel and expense automation.
Yes.
And I just want to assure them that even though that seems like the most ridiculous thing in the world to you from where you sit now, it absolutely is a major thing. We spend an awful lot of time in organizations pushing around paper in really inefficient processes that are partly inefficient because we've got all our databases built on that old rows and columns model rather than the document model. And it makes us really inefficient at doing certain things. And travel and expense processing is one of those things that drives everybody nuts in organizations. So even though it's tiny and obvious, the savings that come from organizations learning to do that better are remarkable. And it's one of the things that will surprise you when you get out and get your first job.
Very true.
So I want to turn now to the kind of what's new and exciting in the industries that you work in, or more broadly in the technology space. So what are the trends that you're each watching? And Ben, I think I'll start this one with you.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to keep up, right? And I know sitting in the seats you guys are sitting on, depending upon where you're at in your journey at WSU, the access to information and how quickly things are moving. I mean, it's unprecedented. So it's hard to keep up. Don't feel overwhelmed, I'd say to all of you, as you start to enter the market and try to keep up with what's hot or what really is making a difference, because it honestly changes. And I'm sure Hannah would agree. It feels like it changes quarterly. What I would say is what I always have learned to look at is a couple of things. Number one, I think the biggest thing that I'm noticing, having been in this industry, in tech and SaaS and cloud for 15, 16 years now, is the expectations of business line owners. And what I mean by that is business operators, people that are doing the work every single day. So someone that may operate a team of 10, 20, 30, there's a high level of expectations on that level of leader within a company to make very drastic, innovative changes depending upon what's going on in their market. And oftentimes to do that, you need to be somewhat tech savvy, because to get these results, that people are now becoming so, the expectations of what a company can do and how quickly they can do it and how efficient you need to be are just continue to lap over and over again. And so that pressure falls on these kind of frontline and middle line leaders within a company. And so to achieve these targets that's put in front of them, they've got to be somewhat tech savvy. And so what you're seeing is a lot of tech companies creating applications, what they would call, a fancy name, they call it like the citizen developer. Someone who can apply a technology very quickly within a business that doesn't necessarily have to be super, super technical. And so that ability to do that as a business owner is big. And that ability for a software company to supply something to a consumer that is easy to use, easy to buy, and easy to implement, how quickly that's becoming a requirement is mind-boggling. To give you an example, even 5 or 6 years ago, when you would purchase maybe a service like Concur, or even one like Hannah was talking about, the expectation of a consumer was maybe that it would take a couple months to get up and running. Now, when you invest in tech, oftentimes people expect you to get up and running in a couple days, and they expect to see results from that purchase even quicker. And so that ROI, right, that return on investment. So that's probably the thing that I'm trying to keep up with it as much over anything, is that what are other tech companies doing to do two things that I think every tech company does very well. If you look at the ones that survive, do extremely well and grow, they do two things. They're very easy to buy from, and they show value quickly and consistently. If they do those two things, they're going to survive and they're going to do really well. And so just constantly looking at what companies are executing on that is probably the biggest thing that I follow.
Anna, what about you?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing, which you guys are probably no strangers to hearing about, is this vast migration to the cloud. I think there's been a lot of companies that have been doing it, and basically what I'm seeing is that I have customers that have been with me for the last year and a half, and at the time that I took them over, they were like, we're never moving to the cloud. It's not secure enough. We'll never be able to justify all of the costs or the changes. And what they're finding out is that, at least within MongoDB, if built correctly, moving to the cloud can be even more secure than being on-prem, because you can have all of this variability in where you store your data, and so it's always highly available, and it's encrypted at every stage that you could ever imagine. And they're making these changes because the cost of owning and operating and staffing and servicing and keeping these on-prem data centers alive is really eating into their efficiency, and they're not getting any more they're not getting any more benefit or value from that platform. And so with our database as a service offering, you could literally on your phone probably spin it up right now, start setting things up, bringing in data, and it's very, very quick and easy to use. It's very simple to use, and their developers really love it. There's a lot of technology that is no longer required when you're using a document-based data model, and so ultimately they're really able to get started a lot quicker. And so these huge companies that were dead set against the cloud, I'm seeing really just run, if not sprint, to the cloud now, which is super exciting and is really going to allow them, at that scale, as well as really small to medium-sized businesses, get up and running and get these applications set up quickly. Like Ben said, the ROI and being able to move as quick as possible is really the most important thing for pretty much any tech company that we're working with today.
It's interesting that you use cloud as an example, because it really does fit that easy to buy and easy to get value quickly.
Yeah, the vast majority of our customers are actually just people that have spun things up and are using a credit card, and some of them don't ever speak to us. So,
Technologies are you watching besides cloud?
that's a really great question. In my role specifically, as I'm having to support and enable, a team of 100 folks, we're looking at other things that are not necessarily process driven, like what Ben mentioned, but that are content driven. We spend a lot of time building slide decks and spending time in documents that we're updating for our customers. And one of the things I'm working on right now is really trying to automate as much of that process as possible. And so there's a lot of technology out there that can do that. I've previously worked for Smartsheet, and they, do a really great job of that, but really taking all of that non-value add, time out of my team's hands and giving it back to them to do other more important things.
What about you, Ben?
I think you could say, artificial intelligence, and I love having this conversation with someone like my dad, who thinks that means robots are going to take over the world and, deliver.
It doesn't?
Yeah, in some cases it can, but I'm sure many in this room are obviously familiar with artificial intelligence. It's the buzzword that automation was 5 or 6 years ago, but it's extremely important. But I think the what happens before artificial intelligence, and Hannah's company is a great example of this, is data. I think what we are finding out is AI is just a result of data being clean and organized, and AI being able to read it and make decisions quickly, effectively for you that maybe a human even couldn't do. Also taking very repetitive tasks, like you hear about RPA, robotic process automation. So taking something, it's a very repeatable human task, and letting a code do that for you. Those are all kind of sometimes bunched up in the same group, and those are all exciting. But what's more exciting is what's in front of it, which is data. Because if you think about it, whether it's like what I described at let's take Concur, for example. They were a travel and expense company, like we talked about, right? So anytime that you go to your next job after you graduate, and maybe you've already did this in an internship or at a summer job, you're traveling. You're swiping your credit card because you've got meetings, or maybe it's an internship, so you're going to an event for the company you're doing an internship for, and so you expense a meal, you take an air trip, you rent a car. All those transactions are now feeding into Concur, right? And if you think about all that data, what can then be used to drive business outcomes from that data? So think about it from a consumer aspect. Hey, what are the best areas to travel during what times? What's the best flight to take during what times? I'm going to be on the East Coast. When's the best time to catch a train? So you think about all that data, and then you think about the business outcomes you can drive. So take the consumer now, look at the business. Delta wants to know, hey, Concur, when are the high peak times that you see business travelers travel? Hertz, hey, what's occurring in San Jose? We just built a big rental car office. What's the volume? Where should we build our next one? Where do you guys see the need? So that power of data and capturing that data, extremely important. And the companies that are figuring that out, the companies that are saying the value of is not the transaction. So at Concur, for example, how we would bill someone who used our service, we would bill them for the expense report when they submit it, right? But that's really not the value of what that service provides. The value is the data it provides. So what you're seeing is tech companies starting to create communities, right? So they can get as many people into their service. Maybe they give it away for free. Maybe they discount it because they understand that the value is what's happening and what's transacting into it. I mean, Google's the super example of that, right? How many times have you swiped your card to pay for something that Google does? I mean, there's Android and something like that, but you use Google every day, and why? It's free. Google can make a killing charging for a search, but they don't. Why? Because the power of the data, the searches, the ads. There's countless examples, but that's kind of what I think is extremely interesting, what I follow, because you can see companies starting to figure it out, letting people to use their service for free. And people are like, well, what are they doing? And creating these communities because they understand the data on the back end is what is of most value.
Does that create privacy concerns, or maybe not even privacy concerns, but if the value is in the data, then the value is in the customer and using the customer's data. And so the customer essentially becomes the product, and often an uncompensated product.
Yes, this is, you guys see it every day in the news. I try not to watch too much of the news these days because it's a little, it's a lot. But there are a few resources that I do trust. It's a great point, and absolutely, that is where tech is meeting regulatory requirements. That's kind of the big talk. But you said something that I think is very important. Well, there's kind of two things. Number one, the consumer is the product. That's a very enlightening statement, and not a lot of, some companies don't understand that, but that really is. And when abused, it can be a situation. You see it in some issues with Facebook and some other areas, but that absolutely is. But with that, consumers are figuring that out. And Hannah just gave a perfect example. Like sometimes, Hannah, I'm sure you sell your service and you never meet the customer, you never talk to them. Consumers understand the leverage they have. Being a lot of my experiences in sales, 80% of the sales nowadays, compared to when I graduated from college to now, which I graduated back in 2003, so seems like ages ago, but it's a relatively short amount of time. People are, 80% of the sale happens without any human engagement. They are educating themselves, they are looking at pricing, and so by the time they get to you, it needs to be frictionless because they have the leverage, they understand their power. But absolutely, to your point, the consumer is absolutely the product in tech many times.
Anna, anything you want to add in on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's all very, very accurate. The data aspect is insane. Ultimately, there is so much of it. If you take our product, for example, we can look and see the actions that all of our customers are taking. And right now, one of the big projects that I'm working on as well is trying to get that data into my team's hands as well. We know that a lot of times, and you guys are probably no strangers to this, like nobody likes to get on the phone anymore. We know that a lot of times our customers don't want to have meetings with us or don't want to interact with a person. And so we're working on putting more of that automation into the product and guiding them to use it well on their own, knowing that that's kind of their preferred method. But sometimes there's just no way to avoid certain catastrophes. And so we're taking a lot of the data that we have today and looking at it and looking for, let's say, particular anti-patterns. If you have a ton of data that you're ingesting and it's growing at a kind of untenable rate, there's an action that you can take within MongoDB called sharding, and you're basically breaking that data apart into smaller segments that are much more easy to work with, and ultimately in the very long run will save you costs. But if you reach that threshold and you get too far, you're unable to do that simply, and it can actually take months. I know in everything that we do today, it feels like data should be lightning fast. And I've run into situations where customers, didn't have that foresight, and they are really stuck and kind of hamstrung and have to go at this really slow pace to break their data apart. And so we're hoping to get in front of those things, and that's what my team is really focusing on, is helping our customers be as successful as possible so that their experience with the product is really enjoyable. And all of that is really only possible with the data that we are collecting ourselves. And so that, I really second that sentiment that the data that's being collected these days is really important.
Okay. I want to transition and talk a little bit about the advice you would give to our students. And so if I think about what you've talked about this incredible volume of data that we're now seeing and that firms are wrestling with to try to figure out how to make value. You've talked about a pace of change that requires being able to turn and adapt very quickly. You've talked about changes in the kinds of ways that companies make revenue from the transaction to the data. And you've talked about kind of some fundamental shifts in technology platforms from more on-premise focused to cloud focused and software as a service. When you look at that landscape of technology, what are the sort of 2 to 3 key skills that you would argue for the students in this audience that they need to be thinking about developing as part of their business program to be ready to meet that landscape when they graduate? Ben, you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think the number one thing that I've learned kind of entering into this market and entering into technology is I think the core fundamentals of business don't leave, whether it's tech or whether it's whatever you're doing. I think number one, you have to be able to communicate well. And I think, looking at what I got out of college was I met a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds, for a lot of different parts of the country. Obviously your friends are studying many different things. And so communication is big. And I think this is such a cheesy kind of thing, but it stuck with me. A mentor there at the university once told me, look, don't be the alligator, be the rabbit. Meaning don't be the person with the big mouth and no ears. Small mouth, big ears, like listen, like this, there is so much going on, and you can learn so much in the environment you're in right now. And look, I was there. I'm actually very impressed. I got from the host, they said there's 100 or so people in there, a couple dozen people, and I'm very impressed. You guys are already a step ahead of me. To get me in the Cub at 1:30 on a Friday, I'm very proud of you and impressed. So everybody in that room right now, you are well ahead. So number one, communication. And you guys are going to naturally learn that. Some you're going to learn it in your classes, but you're going to learn that. And some things you're not even going to realize you've learned until you're out of school. But it's so important to utilize all the resources you have, not just your professors, your mentors, but your peers, because you're going to find it's a very unique situation in college to be around that many people that are kind of in the same stage of their life, right? It's cool to be poor. You're all learning. You all are in that part in your life where you're trying to seek out answers. Utilize that because that skill of listening and communicating, that doesn't change whatever industry you go in. And then the other thing, Deborah, that you mentioned that I think is super important is you've got to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. And what I mean by that is the pace at which businesses are operating at, the pressure that they find to innovate and to constantly be ahead. It's a lot. And so if you aren't comfortable with change, it's going to be challenging to work in tech. And there's good parts about it and there's tough parts about it, just like anything else. But being comfortable with constant change is something that you just have to learn, and it's not easy and it takes some experience. So there's nothing you can do in college necessarily to become an expert. But being flexible and understanding that you're going to have to be comfortable with the uncomfortable would be kind of the two non-stereotypical answers that I would give. So I don't know, Hannah, what you'd have to add there as well.
Yes, I think, Debbie, I feel like maybe you were looking for hard skills, but I think what's really important at this stage of where you guys are in your, career, being in school as part of your career, is really those soft skills. So for me, the biggest thing that has helped me succeed over the last, 6 years that I've been out of school is ultimately really just being as reliable as possible. If someone gives you something to do with a time frame that you need to go and do it by, you get it done. And that's not to say that you don't ask a question or that you ask for help. Managers will never fault you for that, but they need to be able to trust you early on. And especially in this remote world, that is going to be so key. Just because you're not going to have, in a lot of situations, a manager, sitting 3 desks over from you. They need to know that you're going to be able to get, the work that they put in front of you done. So that's something that served me really well. And something that I think, in school, you're already doing that. So just carry that with you. And then I had a couple other ones. In the world of tech, where things are changing very, very quickly, like you said, Ben, it's like almost nauseating how fast things change. You need to continue to hold on to being curious and being willing to go and investigate things. You'll likely have things that are put in front of you to go and do that you've never experienced before. And you need to be willing to go the extra mile and educate yourself and become an expert and become really well versed in whatever this, one aspect is that's being put in front of you. And be bold in that if you come in, you're a fresh set of eyes. If you see something that's been done X way for however many years, that doesn't mean that it needs to stay that way. But the biggest thing I've found, when confronting change like that is come with a solution. Don't come and just pick this problem apart and say, this is why your business is terrible. Say, this is why your business is terrible, but here's how we fix it. And here's how I want to contribute and raise my hand to move forward. So being curious in that regard is something that has also served me really well over the last several years. So.
And this is always really interesting for me. And Hannah, you said, you figured I was expecting to hear technical things. I've stopped expecting that because every time I talk to people in industry, I hear the same thing. You probably hear it from your faculty. You're probably a little tired of hearing it from us, but you have to understand that we are getting it from people who are out there doing it, who are saying this is important. And I think what's important to recognize in that is it doesn't mean that the technical skills you are learning in your program are unimportant. They are important. The thing is, they're table stakes. They're a dime a dozen. What differentiates you, what makes you the person that the company wants to keep rather than somebody else, is your reliability, your trustworthiness. You're willing to innovate and push the boat out. And those are skills that, even though they may not be the content of your classes right now, they are in some cases, but not all, they're very much things you can learn through the process of being a student, being reliable, being professional, looking to do a little bit more rather than just the minimum. And as you start to build those skills, you start to build the capacity now to show what it is that they're looking for once you get out in the world. One of our advisory board members a few years ago, when we were working on the development of the next Carson Coug curriculum, what they said is, we hire you for your technical skills and we fire you for your lack of soft skills. Again, the technical skills, they're table stakes. They are important, and you can start to think about what those might be if you need to be able to communicate effectively, if you need to be able to innovate. There are things you can learn to do in terms of research, in terms of speaking, et cetera. Those are technical skills, but ultimately they translate into the kind of professionalism that both of our guests here have shared. And I don't know if either one of you wants to add anything onto that.
No, it's extremely well put.
Yeah, I'll just add the one last thing that I'm not hiring anyone directly for myself yet, but I'm going through recruiting training currently because that will likely happen. And the thing that is most important is that those soft skills oftentimes can't be taught, but we can always teach you the tech. So as long as you come to us curious and willing to learn, we will invest in you and make sure that you have the right skills and education that you need to succeed. It's just a matter of you willing to, take off and run with it.
Yeah, Hannah, I think it's absolutely, especially right now, you guys are going to be entering a very unpredictable market, but a very hot job market, especially those of you that are kind of at the end and graduating here soon. And I think what Hannah said, I couldn't agree with more. And Debbie, you said it as well, the soft skill piece, and you're getting that being in the situations you're in, whether it's in your class and doing public speaking, whether it's having to work on a project with people of different backgrounds, different stages in their career at WSU. That's super important. But it's that age-old saying, will over skill, especially right now. People that have, and Hannah was talking about delivering on your commitment, so big. But all of these companies, especially if you're looking at getting tech, they can teach you the technology. What they want to know is, are you going to deliver on your commitments? Do you have going to bring some new ideas? I think that was great, Hannah, that you brought that up as far as about coming with new ideas. Your voice is extremely loud. You are going to be coming from a place, especially with how important understanding the consumer is. You're a consumer. You're one of the most important consumers. The age demographic you're in and where you're at in your life, you're a lot of what companies are studying. So your opinions and your voice is respected and very loud. But delivering that in the right way is what's important. And like Hannah said, coming with that solution. I know these all sound super basic, and I can tell you, sitting in that seat myself at one point, sitting in these conferences, listening to people speak, I'd be like, it can't be that easy. But don't underestimate the power of simplicity. It is that easy. Deliver on your commitments. Come with some new ideas, but come with that solution. Communicate well. Listen to what people are saying. It really isn't that complicated. Doesn't mean it's not hard. Doesn't mean you don't have to put in good work, but it's not difficult. It's those kind of core things that are really going to help you, that you're getting, and sometimes you don't even realize you're getting in the experience at Washington State.
I want to back up a little bit. And Hannah, you mentioned the difference in trying to build relationships with people in a remote work environment with COVID. And I think, one of the things that has moved a lot of organizations very quickly in technical terms is COVID-19. Often in information systems strategy, we talk about who's driving the digital transformation of your organization. Is it the chief executive officer or is it the chief information officer? Well, it turns out it's actually neither of those. It was COVID-19 that drove the digital transformation of organizations over the last 18 months. And that has probably led us to a transformation tipping point that will see us continuing in a much more digital mode at a pace way faster than we might have expected. As we've come back into our face-to-face environment, I'm spending a lot of time thinking about what's next. I'm really curious to talk to you about, first of all, what are each of your companies doing right now with respect to being in the office? Are you in the office? Are you remote? Are you hybrid? What's going on? Hannah?
Yeah. So I'm currently based in Austin, Texas, and as you guys may have seen from the news, Texas is a little more cavalier in terms of how we handle in-person things. So we are going back into the office. No one is required to be in the office until January 10th. We just kind of reassessed. It was originally going to be September 1st. We pushed it back to November 1st, and now we're all the way back to January. So there's no requirement on anyone to be in the office yet. But that being said, we're open in Austin a few days a week. Different offices around the globe for us are open currently, obviously still adhering to social distancing and, health and safety best practices. But I've been going in a couple days a week, and it's been really nice to just be, one, in somewhere that isn't my apartment, but two, getting to see people face to face. I think going forward, there's going to be a really hybrid model. My role will never be fully required to be in the office, pretty much ever, as far as I'm aware. We'll likely go in maybe a couple days a week, maybe a few times a month, where we're required to be there all as a team. And that's really just so that we're able to learn and, draw on the knowledge and experience from our colleagues. I would say for those of you that are in roles that are going to be, more entry level and kind of just starting out, there's going to probably be a greater expectation that you will be in person until you have proved yourself reliable. At that point, once your manager doesn't see you as a concern, you'll probably be opened up to a lot more flexibility. And I will say, there's been a ton of benefit from working from home. I've actually been working from home for almost 2.5 years at this point, and the flexibility of being home to take my dog out or to let the repairman in to work on the washing machine, like that is super nice. And so I would say there's I think the hybrid model is just really going to be the best way forward. There's nothing like collaborating in person and spending, all day kind of like locked in conversation with your team and drawing from each other's ideas. But this flexibility that we now have to also live our lives and kind of be recognized more as human beings and not employees, to me is really welcome, and I really, really appreciate it.
Ben.
Yeah, very, very similar to what Hannah put that extremely well. I mean, I think we're in a very similar situation. In my career, even before COVID, tech was already kind of moving in some of that direction. It's kind of like that eat your own dog food type thing. Many of our services we're selling are so you can be remote, right? So I think some companies were already starting to do that. COVID's just accelerated that. I think what's really good is what Hannah said, is that it's not just the remoteness. There's always going to need to be in person. My company specifically, we are going to remain giving you that choice. I think as an operator, like my job, it's given me a lot more flexibility of where I can find talent. Specifically being my company's headquartered in Bellevue, Seattle area. And so that market is extremely competitive. And we're a mid-market company based off our size, 200 million in revenue, 1,000 employees. For us to compete with a Microsoft, DocuSign's obviously gotten extremely big, Tableau, Facebook, Google, these companies are all getting big real estate areas in the Seattle area. It became very hard for us to stay competitive compensation-wise, which is good for you guys entering in the market, but it's allowed me to start to hire in places that I typically wouldn't look. We're starting to hire employees in Minnesota, Allentown, Pennsylvania, where there's universities, but there isn't those headquarters there. So it's given my company a lot of flexibility too to find talent. And Hannah put it perfectly. I think it's really forced a lot of companies that maybe weren't there to start looking at their employees' work-life balance and prioritizing that. Because now, especially for you entering the job market, you have leverage. There is a lot of opportunity for you, and you're going to get to decide what you want to do based off your interests and what it is. And I think people are now going to be able to prioritize that work-life balance a lot more, especially for me being a father of two. My two girls are 9 and 7, really fun part of their life, able to take them to school as an executive of a company, able to drive my kids to school every morning or have lunch with them when they were working remote. Because of COVID, I definitely am glad they're back at school. Let's not get that wrong. I definitely don't think school should ever be remote. That was a tough year, but that is given. And I think to Hannah's point too, that work-life balance, I'm seeing more productivity out of my employees because they are able to do maybe some personal tasks and not feel so pressed at work that I got to get home, I got to do this. Like they can do some of that and they can jump on maybe at 6 when they're more productive because they've gotten their workout in or they've were able to do some things around the house. So we've actually seen productivity increase in COVID because of that work-life balance. I just think that's going to continue. But I don't think anyone can come out, these people that are coming out and saying commercial real estate's over and no one's you always be cautious of people that make bold statements like that. I can tell you office buildings are starting to fill up. Everyone's going to need to be in person at some point. There's going to be new ways to collaborate, but in person, there's going to always be a need for that. And that's going to come back.
So I'm curious, if we know that in-person is always going to be some need, what's going to happen to the employee who lives in Allentown, Pennsylvania?
They fly in.
They fly in.
They travel, absolutely. Yeah, because you also think about, not to get too down a rabbit hole on kind of this hybrid work model, but it's something I think all companies are looking at right now. Oftentimes now, like for us, take us for example, even my days at Concur, we actually have technology that allows you to rent a desk. So basically you say, I'm coming in these days, you check it out. It's like a VRBO or an Airbnb for your office. So it allows logistics to work. And then it allows me not to have to lease out so many floors, which saves me quite a bit of money in rent. And then I'm able to spend money in other places and how my business operates, but also flying people in. And it's also a perk, especially depending upon where you're at in your life. I've done a ton of travel and it's been fun, but when I had a family, I don't want to be traveling as much, but young professionals in their career, they want to go see things. They want to see the world. So that's also a perk that I can offer people is, hey, once a quarter, you live in Allentown, Pennsylvania, whatever, you're going to fly up to Seattle. We're going to have a 3-day meeting. So I see that becoming a perk of some people as well, because Then when they get home, they know they're going to be at home for multiple weeks and not be on the road constantly. So
And that's a big difference if you're thinking it's a once a quarter
exactly.
getting together in the office as opposed to 2 days a week.
Exactly. Yep.
I think it's fascinating, and I've talked to lots of organizations about what they are doing, and I'm hearing echoes of many of the same things across them. But I think just also lots of uncertainty around what's going to happen, knowing what's possible. But I think it is going to take us some time to figure out those models and where we'll be. And I suspect you will all be a big part of figuring that out in the companies that you go to work for. I think the last question I'll ask you, and then we'll take a bit of a break to allow some student turnover in between the class break, is, and then we'll get into some Q&A from our audience as well. What is one piece of advice that you would give to your college age self, knowing what you know now? Hannah?
Yeah, I can go first. I think that I wrote down so many to talk through, but if I could give myself one piece of advice, if, as I was starting out in my career, unless you guys make a huge career pivot, nothing is life or death. Like, unless tomorrow you decide, hey, I want to become a doctor instead, nothing is going to be life or death. And so being able to set those boundaries for yourself and, continuing to be as productive as you need to be, but knowing that you have the freedom, and especially I think in this day and age, companies are waking up to the fact that, again, like I said, we are human beings. And not just employees. Like, that is going to be something that I think will be really, really valuable to you. I spent a ton of time in my first few years in the working world, just constantly like glued to my email and very stressed all the time. And that doesn't actually make you a better employee. In fact, it makes you worse because you're probably not sleeping well and not taking good care of yourself. And that obviously reduces your productive capacity. And so being able to really kind of disconnect and shut down in the evenings is an essential part of life and is going to make you a better employee and help you be more successful. Whereas if you're just constantly chained to your phone and, checking your email and always on Slack or what have you, that's really going to wear on you and you're going to get burnt out really quickly. So for that longevity, you need to take care of yourself and you need to know that everything will still be there the next morning.
It's true. Ben?
Yeah, no, it's funny you say that, Anna, that everything's not life or death, because that's one of the things that I thought about when you guys had sent over some of the questions you guys wanted us to cover. And I could not stress that enough. You guys all have accomplished a lot getting into a prestigious university as Washington State is. But you guys are all taking the right steps. You've accomplished a lot in a short amount of time. And I think these days, the expectations that people are putting on themselves, especially young professionals, can be overwhelming. And I would say, from someone who did quite a few different things on their way to the position I'm in now, I put a lot of pressure on myself, probably more than was needed. And so I think I would tell myself, look at, like Hannah said, every decision isn't life or death. And it can feel like that when you get your first offer, and maybe it doesn't feel right. Or maybe this offer you're getting is in somewhere you don't want to live, or they're telling you you're going to have to do X amount of travel. Those decisions, you go from the life you're now into the professional world. It happens quick. And so I would say, to Hannah's point, not every decision is life or death. You're going to make bad decisions. You're going to make an error in maybe what you thought something was and it wasn't. But you can quickly recover from that, especially at the stage you're at. You can quickly recover from that. So don't put too much pressure on yourself.
And Hannah, you said you had some more?
Yeah, happy to.
We'll hear it.
Sure. Okay, so one of the things that really helped me when I was a student was leveraging my network. I was fortunate enough to be part of the MIS mentorship program, and my first internship that I ever had, in the technical field, I won't say was handed to me, but there was connections that were made on my behalf that were essential and really, really helped set my career on the trajectory that it's on today. So wherever you can get yourselves involved in those areas, by all means, please do so. It's a free asset that you will truly never have again in your life. So if you're like, oh, that doesn't sound fun or that's boring, I don't care. It's like the most important thing that you could possibly do for yourself. Another thing would be that, like Ben said, you're going to transition really, really quickly from this really awesome environment of WSU, like what I wouldn't give to go back, but you're going to transition into the working world, which there's lots of really fun, exciting things to do in the working world. You're going to feel so confident and sure in yourself, and you're going to get to do a lot of really cool things. I have that belief for all of you, but don't be afraid to take some atypical experiences. Like, you're just going to rush into the working world. I did that probably too quickly, and there will always be more work to be done, but there won't be, your youth and the fun times of being poor and going and traveling on a shoestring budget. The only thing I can say is make sure that as you're doing those things that are maybe atypical, that you're learning things while you're doing them. You're experiencing other cultures, you're meeting new people, you're learning about new, technology or new industries that you've never even heard of before. Make sure that you're learning something from those experiences that you can put on your resume and say, here are the things that I learned during that gap year that I took. So don't be afraid of that. There's people in my organization within Mongo that have really atypical backgrounds, and we still hire them. Like, we want those people that have those broad life experiences. So don't shut yourself off from that, thinking that you just need to rush into the working world, because there will always be more work to be done. That is one thing I know for sure. So I'll leave it at that, I think.
I'm going to pause there because I can start to see the students are getting a bit restless. Some of them have to get off to a next class. So I'm going to stop here first of all and thank you both for your participation so far. And we're not done yet. So thank you both very much. And those who have to get to a next class, we'll let you head out. I know there's some other folks coming in. We'll take just about a 5-minute pause and then we'll let you come back in. And Ben, if you've got anything you want to add, we'll pick it up there. And then we'll open it up to questions from the audience.
Great.
All right, welcome back. So thank you very much for those who have stayed. Welcome to those who have joined us. I'm very happy to pick up our conversation with Hannah Fisher and Ben Brewer. And Ben, when we took our break, I said I'd give you a chance to throw out any more advice you wanted to give to these folks before we open it up for questions.
I think Hannah's really covered it, and I think the big thing about it all is kind of enjoying the journey. I think some people, especially when I was kind of starting my career, I wanted to mimic the result, but not mimic the process it takes to get there. And so the result is obviously the most fun. That's the reward. But just like anything else, just like when you look back at your college years too, the process of getting into school there, getting to know people, it's the same way in your professional career. Enjoy the process, because it takes you for a lot of turns. There's a lot of highs and lows, but you'll look back on that stuff very fondly. And it's a fun experience, especially those first years, just trying to figure it out. And honestly, I'm still trying to figure it out. I don't think you ever really do.
Excellent. All right, so I do want to open it up to questions from the audience. We have microphones on either side of the room. So if you have any questions for Ben or Hannah, if you could find your way up to a microphone, and I'm sure they will be happy to answer you.
Hi. So my question is, what is the largest mistake you both have learned from?
Great
In your
question.
careers, that is.
It's maybe embarrassing that I'm so ready with an answer there.
Just honest.
Yeah, just honest. So I think the biggest mistake, and it's kind of a longer term one that I have recently rectified, is that it can seem like hard work and kind of just putting your head down and grinding it out, if you will kind of get you where you want to go in your career. And for people that are lucky, I think maybe that is the case. But for me, I found over the last few years that I was working really hard. I was, doing everything that was asked of me. I was hitting my numbers, whatever they may have been, depending on the role. And I felt like I wasn't getting offered the opportunities that I was interested in, or that I felt maybe would be well suited to me. And what I've learned in this last year and at Mongo under the guidance of a really great manager is that all of those things are great, but if people don't know who you are, or they don't know your name for something, for an idea or work that you've done outside of just what's expected of you on a day-to-day basis, those things aren't going to come to you. So you have to start doing things to set yourself apart, and you have to start asking. So the role that I'm in currently didn't exist until a few months ago, and I'm fully transitioned into that role now. But that role exists because I talked to my manager and I said, this is what I've seen in past companies, and we don't have this role and we need it. And here's why, and here's what I'm doing to set myself up to be a good candidate for that role. And by building that advocate in him for me and advocating for myself, he went to, the relevant powers that be and got the budget approved and the headcount and all of that. And now I get to sit in this role that I'm really excited about. It's like the dream role that I've been looking for. And so that thought of just expecting those things to come across your desk or just come your way is inaccurate. And you need to be willing to fight for yourself and speak up. And I think just specifically as a woman, that's something I had to learn over the last couple of years. And for any of you other women that are in the audience, please take note of that, learn from my mistakes. If you can set your trajectory sooner than I did, you'll be that much further along, that much faster.
Great advice. Ben, what about you?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of mistakes that I've made and that I'm probably continue to make. But I think if I look at I don't know if it was one specific mistake. I think especially early on in my career, and it's something I still to this day have to manage, was spending too much time comparing myself to others. Whether it's in my own organizations as I built my career, whether it's younger in my career, very early, seeing maybe friends or peers accelerate in other areas and constantly, well, why am I not getting that? Or why have I not accomplished that yet? And that would just cloud my vision of my end goal and what I'm trying to do. And so I would lose track of my goals and what I was trying to do because I was so worried about what others were doing. again, nothing novel. I'm sure we've always heard that from parents or mentors. But again, back to what we talked about earlier, that simplicity of stuff that still rings true even today, even as I run a company. Not spending so much time worried about other companies and what they're doing and what they're valued at. I've got to constantly remind myself to always be aware of your surroundings, but focus on what you're doing. That's the important piece. So.
Thank you both. I actually have another question, and I should have introduced myself. My name is Elise Capsey, and I am a junior here at WSU, and I'm a double major in MIS and Innovation and Change Management. And my second question is there any books that you guys would recommend for personal or professional development?
Yeah, go ahead, Hannah.
No, go ahead, Ben. That's fine.
Yeah, there's a few. I think the two that come to mind, especially in your development, I think Speed of Trust is a really good book that I still reference quite a bit. And then The Innovator's Dilemma. I think especially right now with what's occurring in the market, the environment in your major and the majors that you've have chosen are extremely relevant right now. You are not going to have a hard time finding a job when you get out of school. Those are two very hot areas that are in high demand. So you've chosen wisely. And call me when you graduate. But the Innovator's Dilemma and Speed of Trust, I would say there's so many, but those are the two that kind of come to mind first.
Yeah. Call me first. No, just kidding. No, so there's an old one. It's by Dale Carnegie. It's How to Win Friends and Influence People. And then another one called Crucial Conversations, who the author is escaping me currently. But both of those are going to really help with those kind of soft skills that we mentioned. And the Crucial Conversations, it really kind of teaches you how best to approach some of those difficult conversations where emotions can tend to run high, and just how to approach those and get your point across. And then How to Win Friends and Influence People is a really great one in terms of just bringing people along in a journey with you and helping them see the vision and get invested in whatever your ideas might be.
Thank you. I'm actually reading How to Win Friends and Influence People right now. I'm like halfway through it. And then I actually also have Crucial Conversations on my next to read list. So that's awesome. Thank you both so much.
I'm spot on today. Yeah, we're doing kind of like a leadership development class at Mongo that's focusing on crucial conversations in the next few months. So I think it's pretty relevant and a great one to be reading.
Yeah, the one other thing in adding that too, that I think if you're already on that path to add to that, those are two really good books, is Emotional Intelligence. There's a few books about that. It's kind of more research, but there's Emotional Intelligence 2.0. That's another that's kind of in line with some of the books Hannah talked about as well, that are all centered around communication and understanding, motivating and stuff like that. And that's super critical to kind of understand that, because that's probably the biggest transition you'll go through going in to the environment you're in now, to the professional work world, is those dynamics, how to communicate. Those things are so critical. And those probably took, for me personally, probably that was the biggest culture shock, jumping into the corporate environment. And even if you're working for a startup or you go to a Fortune 100, there's obviously differences, but jumping into that professional environment, it takes a while to transition and understand the dynamics. So kind of understanding some of that stuff that those books outline is super, super beneficial.
Other questions?
Hello, my name is Jalal Sarabadani, and I'm a doctoral student here. I actually teach MIS 250, and I'm working on, my dissertation is on work connectivity after hours for work-related purposes. I have a few questions, and Hannah raised interesting points, and I'd like to know your opinion. So I wrote them so that I don't forget them. I would like to know, first, what is the current culture in terms of work connectivity in your companies? And from your personal perspectives, what motivated you or motivates you to be connected to work during non-work hours? And in case you may say, sometimes it's bad or sometimes it's an opportunity, I would like to know what strategies do you usually use to deal with this situation? More specifically, I would like to know, how do you utilize your technology to control work connectivity? And you can talk about the other strategies that are non-technology related, and how these strategies have influenced the outcomes in terms of your relationship in your personal life and in your work life. Thank you. I can say them one by one if you get that.
Well, I think the general premise is around the pros and cons to being connected after hours, and if you choose to disconnect after hours, the benefits that has on your emotional well-being or your relationships. Is that kind of an accurate summarization?
Yeah, I think that's great. Great place to
Okay.
start.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, I only in this most recent, well, not my most recent role, but as I've been at Mongo, had decided to to make that shift. I was realizing that, checking my email in the evenings, while it made me feel like I had more control over what I was doing, I wasn't doing any of the work that I was seeing come in. I was just taking a mental note of it and then having to kind of hold on to that until the next day, as somebody that loves like to-do lists and things like that. So while I didn't feel like it was taking up mental capacity, it really was, and it was forcing me to not be very present with my partner, and we would be sitting at dinner and I would just have thoughts about customer work rolling in the back of my mind. The reason I felt most pressured to be that connected at the time was the fact that I was doing customer facing work, and there can be a lot of pressure when you're supporting customers to be always on and always supporting them, at whatever hour of the day. But I really kind of worked with my manager and also took a step back to say, okay, we have support systems in place. We have technical services support engineers that will help them if something truly crucial does come up, and they are staffed 24/7. So that really helped me take the pressure off of myself to say that anything else that they are asking for can really wait until the next day. And then now that I've moved into my new role where I'm pretty much exclusively internally facing, I feel like I have much more candid relationships with the folks that I work with on a day-to-day basis. They're not my customers, so I can be a little bit more authentic with them. And so I just really set those expectations clearly of when I can get things to them, when I'm going to be online, and when I'm taking time off, to just really completely like remove applications from my phone and not even look. Ben, anything you want to add?
No, I mean, you covered that really well. I mean, I think that the key there is boundaries. I think the one of the other things that you're probably starting to see in the research you're doing in your dissertation as well is that the blending of work life, and it's especially with COVID now. Like right now, we just moved. I'm actually in a rental, which is another dynamic. But I'm sitting talking to you guys here, and my daughter just got home from school, and she's watching a YouTube video, right? 2 years ago, I would either be there with you or I'd be in a boardroom, and so this work-life balance is also being challenged with that, because while we have moved into being connected to business all the time was already something that I think was become overwhelming some people and becoming something people understood they had to start managing. Now with COVID, it's gotten way worse. So in a way where we do have freedom, right? Everyone's working from home. What people who haven't worked from home and haven't understood how to do that, I've done it for many years. I'm talking to colleagues who are just now doing it. It's hard to cut it off because work is now in your home. So I think it's actually accelerated that problem. And Hannah talked about it earlier, kind of that mental health and having the discipline to know when you need to shut it down and when you need to worry about yourself. That's become even harder because of COVID. Because again, you are in your house. There were days when COVID was, we were kind of in some of these lockdowns where I would be in like 3-hour board meetings, and I would walk downstairs and realize I haven't been outside for a day and a half because, you're working, kids get home, you do your family stuff, whatever, blah, blah, it's bedtime, you go to bed. And so it was that constant balance. So I think boundaries and being aware of that, especially in the COVID world, but to get kind of maybe a little more specific of like actions I take and technologies I use, I think number one, super core, especially as you become a professional, and even now in your life, you don't already do, get your phone out of your bedroom. Like I put my phone charger's in my kitchen. And so the first thing I see when I wake up is not my phone. And the last thing I see when I go to bed is not my phone. It's my wife, right? And that's an important thing. So small tasks like that, day-to-day productivity stuff, I turn notifications off on Outlook so I don't constantly see pings, because what happens, and Hannah kind of described this, especially as you grow your leadership career, people will work with you the way you train them to work with you. Meaning, if you respond to every email within 10 minutes, they're going to continue to expect that. Same like Hannah described with her customers. So you have to be very careful about the habits you set, because your teams will follow, or your customers will follow. So I think it was setting those boundaries with my team, not only just verbalizing those, but also taking action so they understand how it works. And it's the small things, turning off Outlook, having my phone outside of my room, having certain alerts. Like when you get in the work world, you'll get very familiar with things like Slack, Microsoft Teams. There's settings on those so they're not constantly pinging you, because everything you work with in your workstation, just like on your phone today with social media or whatever, it works the same way. They are all looking for your attention. So whether it's Slack, Teams, email, they're all competing for you. And so you have to be able to maneuver those notifications and spend some time in those settings to set those the right way, because they're great tools, but they can also be extremely distracting and make you less productive. And I think Hannah brought up a really good point with email in general, and there's already books about this. You can fall into this trap of responding to emails making you productive. And so in some of my leadership teams, we have no email days. So Fridays are no email days. You're not expected to return an email outside of, a customer emergency, but you don't return emails and you don't send emails. And that really helps kind of create that habit where replying to email and writing emails does not make you productive. And that's a trap that I think we all fall into in this work world, especially now all being remote. It's a very dangerous thing.
Other questions?
Hi, it's Elise again. I asked the first two questions. I have another question, and I was wondering, how do you both stay organized? Like, are you sticky note people, planners, like what kind of stuff?
I am big on Outlook is kind of that is a big piece. So everything, I'm kind of a weirdo when it comes to organization, because as we all know, time is the biggest asset you have. And so maximizing your time is extremely important, especially when you start to manage larger teams. So I have a very specific organization piece of how I look at Outlook and how I organize my tasks. So I have a whole color code in Outlook calendar to know what time's allocated for thinking, what time's allocated for executive meetings, what time. And so that allows me to see where I'm at. And then, to Hannah's points earlier about, kind of how you measure productivity, I look at that after each month to understand, how many hours was I spending actually thinking compared to just being caught in meetings. And so Outlook is big. I was a big sticky note person for a while, but had to really jump into being a more technology dependent based on my role. And the other thing too is I take quite a bit of notes, and I use the new iPad. Is great for taking notes, and that way I can search words and search themes. So if I need to go back, and I remember I was talking to this person about this project. It was very hard when it was all paper, because I would have to flip through, a month of notes. Now I can just search those words in my iPad, which has been extremely helpful and help with productivity.
I really love that sentiment of kind of analyzing your time, month over month, Ben. I think that's really great. I haven't quite reached that level of analyses yet, but for me, if I'm just thinking about how I organize my email, and I'll just use my prior role being customer facing as an example, because I'm still transitioning into my new one, but I would essentially set up a customer folder for each single one and basically organize all of my emails in that regard. I don't really delete a single email unless it's, it's something that's not crucial, like an invite to something. And then that way I can really go back. Like if I'm doing something that needs to draw on historical context, I have all of that, you know, it's chronologically organized for me, and it's just based off of that one particular customer. I am also a really avid note taker. For me, it's just like an extension of downloading whatever content is being delivered to me. And so I use, currently I use Evernote, but historically I used OneNote back when I had a Microsoft Office license. We are a Google Suite shop, so I don't have a Microsoft Office license anymore, but Evernote is just as good. And essentially I have a notebook per customer with all of the different groups that I meet with and kind of the different topics that we might engage with. And I'll just organize those notes based off of who attended those meetings or those conversations, and the time that we had that meeting. And then that way it really just builds that chronological view for myself with my own kind of stream of consciousness. You know, sometimes it's overkill. I'll say I don't necessarily spend that much time going back into them, but it just helps me kind of download what the customers are saying to me or what my colleagues are saying to me to then refer back to, because a lot gets thrown at you fast and you might not be able to ingest all of it at one point in time. But then at least you have it to refer back to. A lot of companies now, especially in customer facing roles, are using tools that actually record conversations and will sometimes transcript those calls for you. So note taking may become obsolete, but for me it's like an extension of of my hearing practically. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Hi, my name is McKenna. I'm a sophomore here and a marketing student. And my question was, how was the transition from college to your first job? And what are things that you wish you had been more prepared for going into that new environment?
I can start. For me, it was a little bit painful. What I wish I had known was that, you know, it can be very, very tiring, you know, especially going into an office back when I was doing that, you know, and being there all day and then sitting in traffic and getting home, and just feeling like I wanted to not, you know, not do anything active, not engage with anybody, and just kind of decompress. And while that can be really beneficial, like alone time is really great for you to just kind of unwind. Connecting with people outside of your workspace is really important. So making time to go see friends in the evenings, even if you don't feel like it initially, that's going to be really important. Making sure you prioritize going and doing that workout, even if you don't feel like you want to, because you're going to end up with those really great endorphins. You know, taking that time to prepare a decent meal for yourself because you deserve it and it's good to take care of yourself, is all stuff that I didn't do the first few years out of school and that I'm paying for now, and you know, having to kind of relearn. So if you can kind of set that precedent for yourself early on, it will make that transition easier. You can commiserate with your friends about, you know, how awful working is compared to college and all of that, but it does get much easier, I promise. So
Yeah, super well. I could not agree more with Hannah. I think those initial couple years in the professional environment, especially if you're lucky enough to jump into something that you're passionate about and really enjoy, it's easy to get lost in the work very quickly. And so I think it's just like she said, you know, and fortunately enough, I think again, another byproduct of COVID, but I think this is already kind of occurring, is I think mental health and self-care are becoming much more important. There's much more resources of how to take care of yourself properly. I'm not just talking about obvious like eating well, working out, but really that mental aspect of it, because it's a lot, especially if you're like I said, in a position that you're very passionate about and enjoy. You can get lost in your work very quickly, and so it's just setting those boundaries and staying connected. Like Hannah said, you're going to meet some new people. That's one of the best parts. You're going to have work friends, but staying connected outside of work as well, with your family, with your friends, because that's the group that's going to help you get through the grind that is the work world. And so I think those points I would probably say very similar to what Hannah said. I totally agree with that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Harish. I'm a mechanical engineering major and I'm a freshman at WSU. So my question is, how do you enjoy your life? I think you covered this a little bit of this in your previous question, but how do you enjoy your life and while stay on top of a lot of work? And more specifically, should there be like a designated time and place to relax? And if you and uh and should you be able to find times relaxation time between tasks and jobs?
That is something that if I had the answer to, I would be a multi-billionaire. But I think my personal opinion on that is, there's someone asked about a book recommendation. There's a guy by the name of Adam Grant. He's an organizational psychologist. He worked with some of the Google executives. Has written a few books, but he's got kind of a quote where he talks about if you judge your worth by your achievements, you feel worthless whenever you fall short of your goals. Stable self-confidence comes from learning to separate your performance from your self-esteem. And so really just understanding that there is, there's more to life than just work, obviously that age old thing. But I think sometimes what has been beneficial that I've had to learn over time is not tying all my self-worth to my career and to my achievements at my career. Because when you're in the environment you're in, whether it's engineering, whether it's sales, whether it's client success, whatever, there's always a matrix you're working to. It doesn't matter. I don't care if you're a lawyer, doctor, there's always something you're working towards, and those are important. But sometimes when you spend a lot of time at work, that's the only environment you know. And so you start to tie everything in your life to those matrix or to that achievement. And so I think you got to be aware that you can't just tie everything to that. It's kind of back to that also trusting the process or enjoying the process. You talk to anyone in their career, you listen to anyone speak that's been successful, or athletes, or name someone, doctors, whatever, listening to TED Talks, everyone talks, they don't talk about the achievement. What do they talk about? They talk about the process. And so being aware of what you're doing at that very moment and not spending so much time tying everything to the end result, I think is what I'm constantly balancing and trying to remind myself of constantly. Because again, success doesn't, I'm sure you guys have seen stuff like this, but I can tell you success does not go like this. It's not up and to the right. It's like all over. You're going to have highs, you're going to have lows. And so some people that expect it just to keep going this way, they burn out quickly. And so I think it's just being aware that there is, the process is the best part. I say that, at least in my career. And two, it's important to have goals and aspirations, but don't try tie all your self-worth and self-confidence to just hitting those results. There's more to it than just that.
That was really, really well put. And I definitely echo that sentiment. That's definitely something that I've been really working on over this last year, is just trying to separate myself from my job. And I think COVID has really kind of put a light on that, and the fact that that work is a lot of times what people focus on most, and what they kind of hold to be their whole self-worth. So I think the best way to continue to enjoy your life whilst working is to just continue to stay engaged with people around you, whether that's over the phone or in person. Obviously, it's different for everyone right now. A lot of folks aren't able to be with their families if they want to be. But as much as you can still stay engaged and not kind of like let yourself just get sucked into continuing to do work. For me, I do set the boundaries of that I don't check my email or my phone until I log online in the morning, and that time in the morning is for myself. I listen to podcasts, I take the dog for a walk, I sit and drink a cup of tea, like whatever you enjoy doing in the morning, take that time for yourself, and that will really set you up well for the day. And then I'm not someone that likes to break my thread of concentration. Like for me, if I were to take a walk in the middle of the day, it would be really difficult for me to come back and start working again. But there are tons of people that need that 30 minutes to just go get some vitamin D, some fresh air, walk around, call their mom, whatever. And if that's you, I absolutely recommend blocking out time in your calendar to do that. You in a lot of cases will likely be the owners of your calendar. And if you set that precedent early on, and you're still getting your work done and working the appropriate amount of time, like no one can fault you for that. For me, it's more important in the evenings, like after a certain period of time in the day, I'm just useless. And so is it going to be more effective for me to log off, go be with my friends and family, or stay online and just kind of like spin my wheels? Like if I feel like I could just start a little early the next day after I've had a good night's sleep and am more refreshed. So it's just really knowing yourself and knowing what works well for you, and you'll have to figure that out, because the amount of time you're spending in school does not really compare to how much time you'll spend at work, which is kind of another adjustment that you'll have to prepare for. But you'll figure it out, and you'll start to feel kind of your rhythms and your routines, and sticking to those things that make you feel good, and that help you be more productive, as opposed to spending 12 hours online only looking at your computer. That's going to be what makes you more productive and more effective at your job, as well as enjoying your life more.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take one more question. Oh, okay. One more question here, and then we'll take an online question. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Thaddeus, and I'm a sophomore majoring in financial markets. My question was how Ben mentioned that he saw that from people working at home, he saw more productivity from his employees. But at the same time, you noticed that people were having problems disconnecting work from home life, and it was kind of taking a toll on their mental health, and how over time we're going to end up being back in the offices. And I was just wondering if there's going to be a future where we could potentially see people working from home, where they're more focused. Well, they're more able to, because they're trained to be able to disconnect their work from their home life. And if you believe that the current reason why we're having problems working at home is because of the current culture of working in offices.
I think I understand the question. I think if there's one thing that I've learned about, especially in the industries that we're in technology, software, but I think now everywhere, because technology is becoming a main artery of work life, is things are going to constantly change. And I think I think if there's one thing we've all experienced this last 2 years, is how fragile things are. But also how quickly we can change and adapt to whatever's brought to us. I mean, if you think about it, we locked down the world and the economy still operated. I mean, that's amazing. And so to think that we could predict what this work world's going to look like in the next couple of years, we would be fooling ourselves. I do think that just like anything, unfortunately, challenging times do create opportunity. You are going to see, and you're already seeing it from a technology standpoint, you're going to see new collaboration tools. You already kind of saw it, but this is accelerated, whether it's the way, I mean, look at Zoom's the easiest example, Microsoft Teams, all these collaboration tools that allow you to collaborate remotely. Some of the stuff that Microsoft Teams is doing is incredible, having waiting rooms and conference rooms you can chat with. So I think there is going to be a new wave of collaboration tools. And with that comes people that know how to design those collaboration tools, manage those collaboration tools. There's going to be a new IT security regulations, all that comes with, when you work remote now, security is becoming a much bigger thing, because everything you're doing is transacting, online. So I think that you're going to see more collaboration tools, stuff like that. I think what I'm hoping is, whether it's been COVID or even prior years, and Hannah's talked about it a few different times as well, and I've seen it as also as a priority of mental health, and that really becoming more of a requirement in trainings of executive leaders like myself, or midline leaders, where they're actually trained to work with people on mental health. Nothing like psychiatry or anything like that, but more like understanding how to balance work life, coaching that, how to manage a team and manage a team with work-life balance as a priority. Because if you think about it, everyone talks about it, but no one's really trained on that. Like there's not a class that says, how do you manage work life? But you've heard Hannah talk about it. You've heard me talk about it. One of the toughest transition periods in going from college to a work life is work-life balance, right? It's kind of like when people talk about, how many classes are there that teach you how to manage your finances in the first 3 years of getting out of college? These little life skills. But I think baseline, I think the world's going to ever evolve. I think we will go back in the office in some capacities based off what I'm seeing other companies do. I don't think we will ever go back to 9 to 5. But I do hope, and I do see indicators just in stuff I've been seeing with fellow executive leaders, that people are prioritizing mental health and educating people on how to create a culture of that within a company, which is a tough thing to do. So.
Yeah, I think the companies that are going to hire and retain the best talent are going to have to focus on those things. Some of the companies that are mandating that their employees go back to that 9 to 5 model, they're not going to be able to attract the talent that they need to be innovative and continue to iterate. And so that flexibility, that working from home and not, chaining people to their desks from 9 to 5 is going to offer the working world. I think hopefully as people do it more and more, we'll get more comfortable with setting those boundaries and doing those things that work for you and working in a way that works well for you. My team has established kind of an asynchronous working model because so many of us are distributed globally, that we're not all going to be working the same hours anyway. And it would be easy for us to feel like we need to work all hours of the day, just knowing that we can just pick things up the next day. And if if you're based on the West Coast and you have customers that are on the East Coast, like I've done that work while I've been coming home to visit my parents. I came home for a month in August. I'm able to do that work. I start really early in the morning and then I'm done at 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and the rest of the day, is mine. And I think a lot of companies are also really going to start letting people kind of work from where they want and bringing them in, when it's necessary, like Ben mentioned earlier. And so I think, it's nothing is certain, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it. But as long as you're able to be flexible and adapt, and you are working for, ideally a company that values those things and values their employees, it'll make that transition a lot easier. And, you just have to kind of, as I said, in other scenarios, advocate for yourself, raise your hand if you're feeling burnt out. And typically, as long as you're working for, a good manager, they'll be responsive to that and help you figure out how best to take care of yourself.
Thank you. Angie, you got a couple of questions from the chat.
Yeah, we have a question online, and it says Nintex recently acquired K2 and AssureSign. Does Nintex have plans to acquire more companies or technologies in the near future?
That you'll tell us about.
That is a very yes, we absolutely will. I'll try to spin this into a answer that's relevant for this audience. I think, the company Nintex that I help run, there's 2 ways to grow. You do organic growth, but also you go out and acquire technologies that you need to continue to provide value to your customers. And so we listen to our customers, and there's some things they need that our current product and engineering team can supply. And then there's other things that they need that we can't supply. And in the world of process automation, which is the industry we're in, automating processes within companies, it is growing extremely quick. And so when you have a market like this that has big greenfield, basically what that means is there's a lot of out there to make money on. You have a lot of small companies that find little niches or little problems that they can solve extremely well, that as you get bigger, it's hard for you to dedicate time to. And so we are always looking for those new technologies that can help our customer. But the key is that something that we see our customers need. And if we can't supply that, then we will aggressively go out and seek companies that can, because we want to keep our customers.
All right. Well, thank you both very much. Let's give them a big round of applause for sharing their insights with us today. I know you said at the outset you were both kind of sad that you weren't here in Pullman, and we're very sad that you weren't here in Pullman with us as well. We will send a little bit of Pullman to you at the end of this as a small thank you for being here today. For the students in the room, thank you all for being here today. This is an important annual event, and we're glad you got to share in it, and we're really glad we got to do it in person this year, or at least half in person. So have a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much, and go Cougs.